Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, a game so successful that it essentially put one of Nintendo's top-selling franchises in limbo for an entire console generation. Before this game came along, we were consistently getting Mario Kart titles every 2 to 3 years, but we're now approaching 10 years since the release of the original Mario Kart 8 on Wii U, the last actual new entry in this series. And no, I don't count Mario Kart Tour, even if Nintendo does. While yes, superficially it was a quote-unquote new Mario Kart that came out this generation, albeit one that consists primarily of repurposed content from past entries, come on, it's a mobile game. To its credit, it does as good a job as it could have of adapting the mechanics of this series for a touch-based control scheme, but at the end of the day, it's still a mobile game, which makes it a fundamentally different kind of game from the rest of the series. And on top of that, whatever enjoyment I could have gotten out of Mario Kart Tour was completely buried in a mountain of obnoxious microtransactions. Hey, remember when Super Mario Run came out and we all praised Nintendo for not giving in to the gacha fad and simply putting out a completed game that charges you once and then never again? That didn't last long, did it? But still, Mario Kart Tour's existence was worthwhile because without it, the Booster Course Pass would have almost certainly never been a thing. Now, I fully believe that Nintendo at one point had every intention of releasing a brand new Mario Kart on the Switch. It seemed like a no-brainer. Release 8 Deluxe, squeeze some extra sales out of Switch owners who skipped the Wii U, and then move on to a proper new entry a couple of years later. That had to be the original plan, right? You don't just go into a console generation planning to not ever put out a new game in a series that often sells better than the so-called mainline Mario games. As we saw with Splatoon, Nintendo clearly has no issue releasing more than one installment in a major multiplayer series on the same system. Now, I'm sure they anticipated 8 Deluxe to sell well, but not this well. Year after year after year, the game just kept on selling in numbers that were on par with newer releases. And this continued so deep into the Switch's lifespan that Nintendo must have gone, why bother with the new game anymore? We'll just save it for the next console. But they wanted to give us players something to tide us over, which came in the form of the Booster Course Pass, a DLC package that consists entirely of repurposed Mario Kart Tour content. Yes, even those 4 courses the game tries to pass off as new, I know they were all originally designed for Tour, you can't fool me. Upon the initial reveal of this DLC, I was admittedly pretty sour. Not only did these new tracks look quite frankly hideous in comparison to the base game, but other than the ones from Tour, nearly all of these were tracks that I've already played across multiple past Mario Kart games. It felt like quantity over quality. Sure, we were getting 96 more courses, but I would have happily taken half that number if they weren't all remakes and were visually on par with the rest of the game. Was it better than nothing, which is probably what we would have gotten otherwise? I guess, but it still felt like the lamest possible way to breathe new life into this aging game. As somebody who was part of the precious few who did own a Wii U and sunk tons of hours into Mario Kart 8 before Deluxe even existed, this did not scratch my itch for new content in a series that had been spinning its wheels, pun intended, for the better part of a decade. Even after all this time, Mario Kart 9 had never felt further away. However, as time went on and more waves of this DLC were released, I did warm up to it. The visual fidelity of these tracks improved considerably after the first 2 waves. Some of these tracks had never before been brought back outside of Tour, and it gave people who didn't play Tour the chance to finally experience that game's hidden gems like Merry Mountain, Ninja Hideaway, Sydney Sprint, Singapore Speedway, and its remakes of Calamari Desert and Bowser Castle 3. And the addition of more characters, something that wasn't even originally promised, did a lot to sweeten the deal. Even though Diddy Kong should have been here from day one, and Pete Jet making it in over Dixie Kong, or literally anybody else, should be classified as a war crime, but hey, beggars can't be choosers, right? And It all culminated with the triumphant return of Mario Kart Wii's Rainbow Road, complete with what is quite possibly the single best piece of music in Mario Kart history. Like, listen to this. Through the way Nintendo marketed Wave 6, and the new staff credits that were added upon its release, it was made perfectly clear that no further DLC is planned. This truly is it for Mario Kart 8. Some have speculated, perhaps half-jokingly, that Nintendo will just port this game again for the Switch's successor, but I can promise you right now, that's not gonna happen. The only reason 8 Deluxe sold as well as it did was because it was a brand new game to the vast majority of people who played it. But now everybody has played it, so you can't replicate that success with yet another port. It took longer than anybody would have expected, but Nintendo has finally closed the book on this game that has been with us for just shy of 10 years. And on top of that, support for Mario Kart Tour, the game that was supplying 8 Deluxe with new content, has also come to a close. And listen, I don't mean to sound like I'm talking shit about Mario Kart 8. I love Mario Kart 8 as much as anybody else. It is, in its current form, near indisputably the best in the series. But I've been playing it for so long, and am well past ready for something new. And I doubt that I'm the only one who feels this way. You can serve me the tastiest, juiciest, most perfectly seasoned steak known to man, but I can only eat that steak so many times in a row before becoming permanently sick of it. You don't have to be an industry insider to be damn near certain that Nintendo's next console is coming sometime in 2024, and I am officially predicting that by the end of that console's first year on the market, we will have our hands on Mario Kart 9. Like, I simply refuse to believe that Nintendo is going to let an entire decade pass without releasing, or at the very least, announcing a proper new Mario Kart. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this new game was finished years ago and has just been sitting in their database, ready to hit the market as soon as the new console does. But this paves the way for a new talking point. What form should this new Mario Kart take? Well, if you ask a sizable portion of the fanbase, the answer they'll give you is Nintendo Kart. From their perspective, 8 Deluxe is the definitive Mario Kart experience. There is simply nowhere left for this series to go other than to fully embrace the crossover content Mario Kart 8 gave us a taste of and rebrand itself as a full-fledged mass crossover in the vein of Super Smash Bros. Now, listen, if this is what ends up happening, I'm not going to pretend to not be excited. I completely understand why people want this, and at the end of the day, as long as we get, a new fucking game, I'm gonna be satisfied. But personally, I would prefer it if the series didn't go in this direction. I think that Mario Kart should just stay Mario Kart, and here are 4 reasons why. Number 1, Mario Kart is the biggest source of world building in the Mario franchise. On paper, this seems like an absurd statement. What do you mean these racing games are the biggest source of world building? Isn't that what the mainline games, especially the 3D ones, are for? Well, yes and no. You see, mainline Mario games like Sunshine, Galaxy, and Odyssey are usually pretty self-contained. If they ever do reference each other, it's usually in a pretty superficial manner. Stuff like that one level in 3D World that's vaguely Galaxy themed, or the Delfino Plaza music briefly being heard in Mario Wonder, is usually the most you're gonna get. A notable exception is Galaxy 2's Throwback Galaxy, which not only faithfully recreates Whomp's Fortress from Mario 64, but also acknowledges the passage of time since the events of that game. But the fact that it actually did that is what made that level so unique. That usually doesn't happen. The Mario RPGs certainly offer more in the way of world building, but those games are even more self-contained, and very rarely referenced in Mario titles outside of their own respective franchises. and if Paper Jam is anything to go by, they might not even take place in the same universe. The mainline games, alongside certain spin-offs like Yoshi's Island, Donkey Kong Country, and Luigi's Mansion, introduce set pieces that go on to become franchise staples. But it's Mario Kart that fleshes them out, on top of showing us corners of Mario's world that we've never seen before. Like, here's one example, Sunshine Airport. It can be assumed that the airplane we saw in Mario Sunshine's opening was Peach's private jet because, you know, she's a princess. You really think she's gonna fly commercial? But Isle Delfino, it's a popular vacation spot. So how do the common folk of the Mushroom Kingdom get there? Well, here's your answer. An airline dedicated to transportation to and from the island. Here's another one, Toad's Factory. Where do you think all those item boxes come from? You think they just spawn out of nowhere? Wrong. They get produced right here in this factory, which is apparently run by Toad. I never pegged the guy for a ruthless capitalist, but I suppose looks can be deceiving. Or how about Wild Woods, where we see a thriving community of Toads and Shy Guys living in harmony. What this shows is that not all Shy Guys, and by extension, not all Mario series enemies, work for Bowser. I really can go on and on with the examples, but my point here is that if Mario Kart becomes Nintendo Kart, this all goes away. Let's assume that Mario Kart 9, at least at launch, will have 24 new tracks, since that's how many 8 Deluxe had before the booster course pass. Since the track selection would need to accommodate the multiple franchises being represented on the character roster, most of these franchises would only get 1 track each, with the bigger ones like Mario and Zelda maybe getting 2 or 3. And all of these tracks would most likely be based on pre-existing set pieces that best represent their respective franchises. For Zelda, it would be Hyrule Field or maybe the Great Plateau. For Kirby, it would be Dreamland. For Metroid, it would be Planet Zebes, and so on. That works fine for Smash, a series that's always been all about celebrating Nintendo's history. But for Mario Kart, a series that's always been a source of creative twists on familiar Mario elements, it would feel like a step backwards. There have been a handful of tracks across the series like Luigi's Mansion, Delfino Square, DK Jungle, and Yoshi's Island that are directly based on specific games. But the majority of the most beloved Mario Kart tracks are the ones that do something completely off the wall and unexpected, having you race through a pinball machine, a cruise ship, a mall, a planet made of cheese, a ski resort, a clock, a fucking bathroom, and of course, a rainbow-colored road. Even some of the more mundane settings like highways, beaches, and farms do a lot to make the world of Mario feel less like a collection of levels and more like a living, breathing place. In a Nintendo Kart game, I'm pretty sure that Mario would be represented with a generic Mushroom Kingdom track, another Bowser's Castle, maybe a New Donk City track, and that's it. That would be kinda lame, wouldn't it? Now, to be clear, I absolutely would welcome a select handful of crossover tracks. Hell, I'd kill for a Pikmin track, but they should be handled the same way Mario Kart 8 handled them. They don't need to be the main attraction, and they shouldn't come at the expense of wacky, creative Mario-themed tracks that offer deeper glimpses into the world these characters reside in. Number 2, say goodbye to like 75% of the roster. How I feel about the tracks in Mario Kart also extends to the characters. Since the series prior to 8 had been solely Mario focused, well, except for Rob, I guess. Like, does he count? Because he's not really a video game character per se. Anyway, it's given a spotlight to a lot of less prominent characters who most people wouldn't even dream of seeing in Smash Bros. In fact, Double Dash straight up created a new character who became so popular that she now shows up all the time in mainline games and RPGs. But even if this hypothetical Nintendo Kart were to have a roster just as big as Smash Ultimate's, it would probably still need to strip the Mario cast down to the A-listers. As for fan favorites like Shy Guy, Dry Bones, PD Piranha, and our beloved Funky Kong, I don't see them making the cut. And characters people have been asking for, like Professor Egad, or the Mario Kart Tour exclusive characters like Nabbit, Dixie Kong, and King Bob-omb, forget it, you're never seeing them. Again, just like with the tracks, I would love to see a handful of guest characters, but they should be just that, guests. Like, if it was up to me, I would bring back all the guest characters from 8 and add Zelda, Kirby, Pikachu, Samus, Olimar, Fox, Captain Falcon, and Pit as DLC, and maybe also Sonic and Pac-Man if third-party characters are on the table. And that's where I would cut it off. Maybe this is just me, but I would rather the roster leave room for lesser-known Mario characters instead of swapping them out for the likes of Marth, Shulk, and Mr. Game & Watch. Number 3. Not everything needs to be a crossover. It might be difficult to remember in this current age of shared universes and gratuitous fan service parades like Ralph Breaks the Internet and Space Jam 2, but there was once upon a time when crossovers were like a special occasion. I still remember my 6-year-old mind being blown when I saw the Fairly OddParents crossover with Jimmy Neutron, and when Batman showed up in that one episode of Superman the Animated Series. Like, you're telling me these characters from 2 different shows are talking to each other? That doesn't usually happen. Outside the comics, but I didn't read those growing up because I am uncultured. And you better believe that 10-year-old me spent like a month counting down the days to the premiere of the I Party with Victoria special, which in hindsight was pretty underwhelming because most of the characters barely even interacted with each other. Like, why even bother doing a crossover if 80% of it is pretty much an iCarly episode and a Victorious episode running parallel to one another? That could probably be its own video, but who am I kidding? I'm not Quentin Reviews. Wait, what was I talking about? Oh, right, Mario Kart. Nowadays, crossovers are a dime a dozen, at least in the realm of film and television. I'm usually not one to blame the MCU for everything wrong with modern pop culture. I find those kinds of people obnoxious, but you can't deny that it is what kicked off this trend. Crossovers in gaming aren't quite as frequent, which means they can still feel special. Smash Bros. Is a series that has been around for 25 years. And how many games has it had so far? 5. Well, 6 if you count the 3DS and Wii U ones separately, but I don't. When a new Smash game comes out, it's not just a game, it's an event. It's a once-in-a-generation occurrence. And that's exactly what makes Smash Bros. Special. That is such a huge part of its identity. So, if Nintendo starts putting out racing games that are also mega crossovers, I don't know. It feels like it might kind of take away from what makes Smash Bros. What it is. And let's say the fans who want Nintendo Kart get their wish. Do you really think that's going to be the end of it? If Mario Kart becomes a mega crossover, I can guarantee you that there will be people who look to other spin-offs like Mario Party and Mario Tennis and demand they receive the same treatment. It's the classic if you give a mouse a cookie situation. You gotta draw the line somewhere. This is less of a reason for why I don't want Nintendo Kart and more of a reason for why I don't think Nintendo would go for it. A lot of it really just comes down to the name. What would this game even be called? Because it sure as hell won't be called Smash Kart because that's stupid and makes no sense. If not Nintendo Kart, maybe Nintendo Grand Prix, Nintendo All-Star Racing, Mario and All-Stars Racing Transformed? I don't know, none of those really have a ring to it, do they? Mario Kart, it's simple. It rolls off the tongue, and it's a brand people are familiar with, even people who have never touched a video game in their lives. Purely from a business perspective, overhauling a brand as successful and tried and true as Mario Kart seems like a pretty huge and frankly unnecessary risk, doesn't it? You see, there's a lot more to the identity of the Mario franchise than just platformers. By this point, the Mario Kart series in particular has become every bit as synonymous with the overall Mario brand as those platformers, to the point where referring to it as a spin-off doesn't even feel accurate. There's a reason why it was so heavily represented in the movie. To wrap up this video that I really thought would be a quick one, but here I am 5 single-spaced pages into this goddamn script, I kind of reject the idea that Mario Kart is in serious need of some kind of massive shakeup. If Mario Kart 9 simply delivers a fresh batch of inventive tracks, a handful of new characters and items to play around with, and the same perfect controls and stunning visuals of its predecessor, I'll be happy, as far as the core game goes. Plus, there are plenty of ways for this series to grow other than turning it into a crossover. The easiest thing Nintendo can do is simply look to past entries, which still have things that Mario Kart 8 didn't. For instance, they can add a mode that revisits the Double Dash formula, where it's 2 characters to a kart and the physics are a lot heavier. they can finally bring back Mario Kart DS's mission mode, or better yet, make a proper adventure mode in the vein of Diddy Kong Racing or Crash Team Racing. And for as much crap as Mario Kart Tour gets, it is filled with a lot of really cool character costumes that absolutely should be carried over to future games. But for the love of God, please don't log them behind gacha bullshit, just make them in-game purchases with coins. I'm sure I'm only scratching the surface here, but the possibilities are clearly plentiful. But yeah, as I said, if it turns out that Nintendo Kart really is what's next for the series, you're not gonna hear me bitching about it. I'll be right there with you guys on the hype train, because, as I said before, a new game is really all I want. It's just like how we can talk all we want about how a Nintendo Cinematic Universe isn't a good idea, which, I mean, it probably isn't. But if the sequel to the Mario movie were to end with him opening his mailbox and finding a Smash invitation, don't lie to yourselves, we would all lose our shit. And while we're on the topic of the Mario movie, I guess I just wanted to thank you all so much for giving the video I made in March the support that it did. I'm pretty proud of how that video turned out, so I was glad to see that hard work pay off. I can't take all the credit though. My very talented editor slash sister Prismatic Pichu played just as big of a role in bringing that video to life. Anyways, it'll probably be at least January by the time you're watching this, so I hope you all had a pleasant holiday season, and Happy New Year.